Welcome everyone to this afternoon's session brought to you by our headline sponsors, YouTube. A session which is allowing me a career moment of saying the following words out loud rather than in my fevered imagination. Silence, please. Live from Edinburgh, it's Saturday night. My work is done. Yes, NBC's Saturday Night Live premiered on, if you believe it, on October the 11th, 1975, and is one of US television's longest-running primetime shows. For 44 seasons, this comedy variety hybrid, created by Canadian Uber producer Lorne Michaels, has gone out live from Studio 8H of NBC's 30 Rockefeller Plaza complex, clocking up 871 episodes, which have entertained, outraged, and educated America like no other television show has. The show has frequently changed the way that Americans think about themselves, and particularly what they think about their politicians. Now, with the show's reach incredibly magnified by an ever-growing digital presence on YouTube, the world is feeling the SNL effect. The show has been voted one of the best television shows of all time and has amassed 270 Primetime Emmy nominations, the most by any television show ever, including 18 nods for this year's Emmys. It's safe to say that SNL has still got it after all these years. Well, today we get a very rare chance to explore the background to this extraordinary broadcasting phenomenon, and because we're joined by three distinguished members of the current SNL team. Anna Drezen, who joined the SNL writing team in 2016, not 1916, 2016.
She's a ghost.
She's been doing it a long time. And Anna is in town. She's currently honing her stand-up skills with a show, which is at the Pleasance. Tickets available. It's called OK, Get Home Safe, and it is very, very funny. Michael Scogan is Vice President, Strategic Partnerships for NBC Entertainment Digital, and he is the architect of the incredible growth of the SNL brand across the key digital platforms. And Eric Kenward, who is an Emmy Award-winning SNL producer and writer, and he does qualify as a veteran. He joined the show in 2001. Ladies and gentlemen, our panel. So, the ever-shifting SNL cast has made superstars of so many performers. I'm just going to name a few. John Belushi, Gilda Radner, Chevy Chase, Bill Murray, Eddie Murphy, Mike Myers, Will Ferrell, Tina Fey, Chris Rock, Amy Poehler, and Kate McKinnon. That's to name just a few. And those stars, with the help of the best comedy writers in the business, plus a roll call of glittering guest hosts, have combined to produce some of the most incredible entertainment television moments of all time. Let's take a look. That's 40 years, 40 years there. Eric, I'd like to start with you. Why 40 years? How has it lasted so long, and why is it so good?
Well, I guess it's probably its willingness to change a little bit, I think. I mean, Lorne Michaels, who created the show, certainly has strong ideas about what he likes and doesn't like, but I think he's also willing to kind of let the show evolve on its own terms and to be kind of, led by each successive generation. So I think the show's never really tried to be locked into any one type of thing. And obviously the 70s show is very different from the 90s show, is very different from the 2000 show, is very different from the show we do now. Like, we always talk about how everyone always says the show was better, 10 years ago. And everyone's favorite show is always the version that was on when they were in high school. And I think that that's a testament to the show in a way, that it can mirror each of these periods and it can evolve that way. And I think that that's probably the key, to be willing to change and to not be too hidebound when it comes to one way of doing things.
Anna, what is it about the show that, you've worked on it for a while, but you grew up watching it. What is it that makes it so special?
Yeah, I was definitely a Spartan cheerleader for Halloween, but just one by myself because I didn't have a ton of friends. Yeah, I think it's cool because the show, there's 10 sketches per show, ish. So each week we can try out a lot of different things because it's all like 3 to 4 minutes of an idea. And then if it doesn't work, it gets cut after dress, and then you can try it all again the next week. Like there's 35 different sketches that get read every week. So I think it's exciting, like as someone who works on the show, that you can try something and do a big swing, and if it doesn't work, it's not like it has to sustain for 22 minutes the way that a regular show would, that It can just be, here's 5 minutes of a weird grocery store. Do you like it? No? Great, we're throwing it in the garbage. It's great. Or like it goes to air and does well, and that's also really fun.
I mean, it's maybe obvious to say, but it is a variety show. I mean, it's meant to be many different things. So you're not, one viewer really isn't supposed to like every sketch, you know? I mean, like you're always gonna have your favorites. And I think that because it is an hour and a half long, because it is so varied, I think viewers can kind of discover what they like. So sometimes I think, you know, things that maybe weren't working at one period of time maybe kind of will rise to the fore naturally, and other things will kind of fall away. And I think the format of the show, the variety, kind of allows that to happen organically, I think.
Michael, you're at NBC and obviously working in the digital area, but in thinking NBC terms, just how important is the show to NBC?
I mean, incredibly important for 44 seasons now. And I mean, I think for me, the fact that it's so timely and relevant, and it was social, you know, years before social media, it was sort of made for YouTube years before YouTube, and that sort of hasn't changed. But, you know, incredibly, you know, important for the network.
Yeah. There's a thing in Britain that I'm sure there'll be a lot of producers here who will have heard this. People will say, why can't you make a British sketch show like SNL? And it is pointed out that they have a writing room, we now know, which has got at least 20 writers in it. I don't think many UK shows have that. I'd like to talk about the process because we understand how good the show is. It's important to know why it happens and how it happens. Eric, explain the process. First of all, it is going to happen on Saturday night.
Yes.
When does the show process start? Can you
Well,
talk
I'll try
me
and
through?
do this as quickly as I can.
Yeah.
So it starts on Monday. We don't really think about the week's show until Monday. You don't, because you're so preoccupied with the previous week's show that there's very little planning in advance. There's very little banking of material. There's very little like, well, we know we have Adam Sandler coming in 3 weeks, so we're gonna do this piece for him then. You're kind of always focusing on the show at hand. And so Monday we come in, the writers come in at about 2 or 3 in the afternoon. We have like a brief meeting called a topical meeting where we kind of talk about what we think the big stories of the week might be, if there are any special guests around that week, just kind of housekeeping business. Then there's a meeting in Lorne's office where all the writers and all the cast go in and talk to the host. Lorne usually calls it the writers' meeting. We all call it pitch. But you basically pitch a couple ideas to the host. A lot of times they're not real. A lot of times you just want to pitch an idea, a funny idea in the room that's going to make the host laugh. Sometimes they're real, but I think
the host is there.
The host is there.
And that's a commitment, a contractual commitment. They have to be there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that a lot of hosts are pretty nervous at that point.
Yeah.
So I think to see 20 people and 20 cast members troop into a room and pitch you ideas, it's kind of a way to put them at ease. To to make them feel like I've got all these people working for me now. You know, I mean, I think that that's part of the point of that. Then Monday night, we don't really do very much. Some people stick around and we'll start to write things a little bit, but Tuesday is really the intensive writing day. People come in at about 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and then we'll stay all night until the next morning, until Wednesday morning. And we can talk a little bit more about that in detail later, I suppose, but people will kind of write individually or write sometimes in teams of 2 or 3, or writers will pair up with cast members. There's really no set formula to it. People will find people they like to write more than with others, but you're not assigned really to write anything in particular on Tuesday night. It's sort of up to the individual writers. Then on Wednesday morning, we read about, like Anna was saying, about 35 sketches, between 35 and 40 sketches. Which can be kind of grueling. People will sort of, are learning their parts on the fly. Sometimes there'll be whole songs in the sketches that will just have been written moments before. People are trying to do, sound effects and sort of convey the idea that how their sketch is going to be mounted later. And then depending on how those sketches play, how well they do in the room on Wednesday, the producers, the head writers will pick between, say, like 10 and 14 sketches that then get put into production on Wednesday night. The writers have a lot of autonomy at the show as producers, so they meet with the department heads on Wednesday night, the head of design and the costume department and props, and they talk about what they want for their sketch. Then on Thursday morning, we come in around noon and we start rewriting everything. There's 2 separate tables of the writers, and we'll go through every sketch and try to tighten them up and change things. Sometimes sketches won't change very much. Sometimes they'll kind of change wholesale. Sometimes we'll pick something on Wednesday night basically based on the idea, with the idea that it's going to be completely rewritten. Sometimes they stay very much as is. And then in the studio, we start to block things. They start to figure out the sort of choreography of the sketches, where the cameras are going to go. All day Friday, we block all the pieces that hadn't been blocked on Thursday. And now, this is a way the show has changed since I've been there, but now increasingly on Thursday and Friday, we'll write the cold open, the first sketch of the show, or we'll write more topical sketches later in the week. It used to be the news cycle was slower, and so sketches that we picked on Wednesday would sort of hold up on a topicality level until Saturday, and that just doesn't happen as much anymore, so there's a lot more late in the week writing. Sometimes that will happen all night on Friday. Sometimes things aren't really done until Saturday afternoon. At Saturday, at noon, we start running through the show, where you go through each sketch in 15-minute increments. We usually have like a last-minute table where we can kind of rewrite sketches that need work or that have been written late in the week. We'll go over all the features on the news segment of the show, on the update segment of the show. And then at 8 o'clock, there's dress rehearsal. After dress rehearsal, based on the way the sketch is played, we'll cut between 3 and 5 of them. And then at 11:30, the show is live and we do it. That's how it goes, basically, in a nutshell.
I hope that everyone's writing that down, because that is how you make Saturday Night Live. That's incredible. Anna, in the writing process, first of all, can I ask you an important question about writing? This is very important for now.
Yeah.
What is the gender balance in the writing room?
It's like 15 men, 5 women, so like 50-50. Women be talking. Yeah. I recently learned that men are people, so I work well with that. So.
Tell me about the writing experience for you as a writer. So the pitch, that must be the hardest thing of all. What's that like? How nerve-wracking is that?
Yeah. My whole first year, that was like the worst part of the week for me. Like I would get genuinely physically ill because you're like sitting on the floor next to the trash backwards, looking over your shoulder at Kit Harington, like, maybe you're a seal. I'm sorry, this is stupid. Like a famous like Hollywood man is watching you from his desk, and like, but yeah, it's just like Eric said, sometimes you don't want to tip your idea for what your sketch is going to be, because the table read, it's like a staged reading, and if people laugh at it more, then it helps your sketch, and if they already know what the joke is, people won't laugh as much because they'll be like, oh yeah, I remember that. But it's very low stakes. Now that I've been there a couple of years, I know that it's just like Eric was saying, just to let them know, like, hi, we can talk, we can sit upright, we've got some ideas for you.
Right. It's all happening.
Yeah.
But competitive, it must be competitive, and the idea that this group of people, are you working together as a sort of corporate being, or are you all, I want to get my sketch on, I don't like the other sketch? How does that work?
I think now that I'm like supervising writer, I look at the show more as a whole, but
Yeah.
when you're newer there, especially like when I was hired, there were a lot of people hired all at once, so it felt a little bit
And I feel like, I've been there for like 2 million years now, so like I've seen more generational ebb and flow, and I feel like right now, I mean, there's going to be a certain amount of competition in that you want your sketch to get on, but I think it's like there's more kind of esprit de corps right now, more people kind of like, it feels like everyone's kind of pulling on the same side of the rope, and I feel like I've definitely been there in eras where it's a little more cutthroat, where on Wednesday you really feel like people are out to, blow the other person out of the water. And you're pulling for your own piece, but I think everyone kind of knows that, I don't know, I mean, the better the show is, the better everyone looks at the end of the day.
Definitely, yeah. I like pitching on other people's sketches more than I like writing my own,
Yeah.
which is a problem, but.
I've always really like Thursday is kind of my favorite day.
Yeah.
Like once all the sketches are picked and we all get to sit around together and go through them, that's really maybe my favorite part of the show. Yeah.
Yeah.
I should say to everyone, I have the famous TV Festival app in front of me, so if you have questions that you put on the app, I can see them here. But also for this session, we have got mics at the end, so we're going to open it up to you. If you think about something, if you want to do something live, because we felt that's the way it should be, then we'll ask later towards the end of the session. It's fascinating, and very much appreciate you being so open about the process. I wish we could replicate here, but I think it may take some time. This apparently is a question which is the question that you mustn't ask, but I'm going to. I mustn't ask because it's a dumb question. Live, it's in the title. Isn't comedy better edited?
Yeah. It's a bad idea for a show, honestly. There have been several weeks where I'm like, this is insane. We should just tape this. Why would we do it this way?
It is adding a whole nother level of difficulty that seems a little gratuitous sometimes. But
Yeah.
I think that lately the advantage that it's given us is that the show can change up until the last minute.
Mm-hmm.
And that being able to address a news story that broke on Friday afternoon in a opening sketch on Saturday is an advantage that not every show has. And I think there is just like a natural excitement to it. You can feel it in the studio. There's an eventiness to it that people all sort of feel like they're living in the same moment. And I was saying this to you earlier, but there is kind of a NASCAR element to it, tuning in to see the car crash. And I do think that's a reason that people watch it sometimes, that they know there's kind of a high wire act going on and that someone might fall and eat shit, and that's exciting.
I have some cousins who are conspiracy theorists who think we mess up on purpose to drive up ratings.
That's great.
No.
That's all scripted.
Yeah.
Huge ratings bump.
Sure. Yeah, I know.
Well, I think as becoming clear, the machine that is needed to put the show on is really state of the art, and we're going to get the chance to see that machine. Have a look at this. That is part of the YouTube backup to Saturday Night Live, the making of. Michael, how did that come about, and did anyone object?
No, no one objected. I mean, that for us as a digital team was a best case scenario situation. That entire sort of digital series was created, produced, by a guy, Oz Rodriguez, a film unit director on the show, sort of a passion project for him and something that he came to us with, like, hey, can you guys help me do this? Which we're more than happy to. And his sort of idea was like, look, a lot of people have sort of told the story of SNL, but no one has sort of told the story of the people, right, that actually worked really incredibly hard all week to make the show, right? And he, being with the show, has this incredible access that no one else has, right? So that it's just, to be a small part of helping him sort of put that out there has been amazing.
Yeah, it looks great, but it's such a great insight to the way that things work. Yeah. And what is very apparent there is that as writers, you can mess people's lives up very, very badly by deciding, well, as you were saying, a certain character appears in a sketch who requires a major prosthetic, and it's Friday.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we try hard not to do that, but sometimes it just happens inevitably. I mean, like, I vividly remember that Mitch McConnell thing. I mean, because obviously that's like no small prosthetic there. And I remember that sketch was written on a Friday night, and Louis had to make it overnight, that bullfrog neck and everything. I mean, it was
so crazy. Yeah, it's made out of like weird liquids and stuff that
Yeah.
like the actor has to sit for hours.
Every cast member has a face mold on file, and then every host who's ever hosted the show has a face mold on file. So when you go down to the makeup lab, there's just this row. It looks like that temple in Game of Thrones.
Yeah, it's hell on
and
earth.
it'll be like Jim Carrey and Abraham Lincoln, and I mean, yeah, it's really crazy.
Famous hosts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. Some really good questions coming in. One that I just noticed coming through was for you, Anna, and it was, how many sketches do you have to get accepted to get your contract renewed?
Oh, it's really more of a feel thing.
No, I think
Yeah.
they want precise numbers.
I would say 4. That's the minimum.
We
I
don't really
know.
work on hard and fast numbers like that. You kind of just know if it's working.
Yeah, it's also like a lot of stuff doesn't get accepted for reasons like, oh, we don't have enough room in the studio for that particular set,
Yes.
or it wasn't the right host, or things like that.
Yes.
That like people are doing good work that doesn't always get
Absolutely.
to air.
Yes.
And you also need people who are a good team player who can
Right.
support and who are willing to run around and help with getting messages to the costume department and
Yes. Or rewriting on Thursday.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's like having good taste and being having a good sense of how to not to be crazy, I guess.
Yeah. Like Tina Fey had said to me once that like basically you interview writers to decide whether this is someone you would want to kill at 2 a.m. or not. Like, can I stand this person when I run into them in the hallway at 2 a.m.? And that's basically sometimes what it comes down to.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Can't be too many big personalities because it's so many people.
Well, let me talk about big personalities, the cast. And the incredible thing is the shifting cast. And I've mentioned some of the names, you've seen them on tape. Is it completely organic? Do people just move on and some people stay for a few years, some people stay for a short time? How does that work? Is that a Lorne Michaels thing? How does that work?
I mean, it is pretty organic. It really is. I mean, I think, not to get too into the nitty-gritty of it, but I think that cast members, the standard contract now is 7 years, but a lot of them renegotiate that before it's up. So that 7 years is kind of a ballpark figure for a standard tour of duty lately. But obviously some people, Kenan Thompson, Daryl Hammond stayed much longer than that. Kenan Thompson, I think, is now like the longest running cast member. And then some people only stay a couple years but make like a major, impression on the show. It really is just kind of, there's really no rhyme or reason to it. And I think that that's kind of what I was talking about at the beginning a little bit. It's kind of like Lorne sort of allows the show to evolve organically. Like, it is often more of a bottom-up affair than it is a top-down affair. And I think that's part of what helps the vitality of the show and keeps it sort of relevant.
And in looking for talent and finding people who are going to perform and write in the show, is the digital place, is that helping? Because that is a place where people go to now and can be seen. Is that a process that's happening?
I think so, right? Like, you guys find, talent from YouTube,
Yeah.
social media,
I mean, I'm trying-
writers. And
Yeah, we do. I mean, I feel like it is a way that people make things now that help them kind of break through or get on our radar. I mean, we still do a lot of scouting at the traditional venues in the US. We still look at a lot of stand-ups. We go to Second City in Chicago. We go to the Groundlings in LA. We go to the UCB Theater in New York. But often now I feel like it will be like you'll see someone and they'll have some videos online that you'll take a look at that might help kind of round out your sense of who they are as a performer or creator. I don't feel like we've really ever found anyone purely online, but it's definitely a dimension to scouting now.
I think it also helps if people have work up that you're excited about the person. It's easy to send them a video of them from YouTube.
Yes.
Like, I know this person from real life, but here's an example of their work.
And I can think of people that we've like seen online and then gone to go see, and then you know, I can think of cases like that. But yeah, so that does happen.
Yeah. Quite a lot of people are asking about how you got started. Anna, how did you get picked up for the show?
Chris Kelly was one of the head writers when I was hired, and he knew me from Reductress, which was a fake women's magazine. It's sort of like The Onion, but The Onion is a fake newspaper, Reductress is a fake women's mag.
What's the gender balance on that writing?
Oh, it's great. It's the way the world should be. I think we sometimes have a boy. I don't know. I can't tell. But yeah, and then the way they hire people is they ask for a sketch packet, which is pretty typical for late night shows. So you'll submit 3 to 5 sketches of varying types, like a political, a commercial, character sketch, and then you interview with some of the head writers. Yeah, that's how but I did stand up and improv and sketch in New York. I went to theater school, which was, you know, a decision. Yeah.
And Eric, how did you get?
I worked on a humor magazine at the college I went to, and some people that had worked on that were working at the show, and they encouraged me to submit a packet like Anna did, and I did, and then didn't really hear anything for almost a year, and then they called me in for an interview, and then I didn't hear anything for another 6 months. And then they called me up one day in the middle of February and said, "Can you start on Monday?"
That's so insane.
Yeah, I know. Tell me about it. Yeah. And
It's crazy.
75 years later, I'm still
And we should also say that you also work on another show, which is actually being featured today in the festival, because Hugh Laurie is here, Veep.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. It's a nice thing about SNL is that
You do that on a Sunday.
I do that that's my summer job. That's my summer job.
wonder.
It's a nice thing though, like Anna and I were just talking about this because she just did the same thing on another show, but it's a nice thing about SNL that it lets you do other things in the summer. And I think that kind of is another thing that kind of contributes to the vitality of the show, that you have people going out, working on these other shows, doing these other things, kind of bringing ideas from other places back into SNL. I feel like it keeps it from being kind of cloistered and sort of arid and onto itself. Like it pumps new blood into it in its own way. Lauren is always very encouraging of that, likes people to kind of go out and do their little sabbaticals and then come back, and he likes that.
NBC does not allow me to do that. I'm not encouraged to.
Go work for other networks.
Yeah. Moonlight for ABC.
But, well, the work you're doing, Michael, is very important, because the reason that I think everybody here knows about SNL, understands SNL, is because we watch it, we don't see it on UK television at the moment, but we see it on YouTube. And it's almost like it was made for YouTube. A sketch show is in its construction works for clips. But tell me about the process and how it was working with the people who make the show, for whom it's a precious thing, and for your needs for the digital space.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think the biggest change we made was about 4 years ago. We used to only put up 4 or 5 sort of sketches or clips from the show, and so, you know, I would sort of bug Eric and another producer on Saturday nights. What are the 4? What are the 5? You know, emails, text messages, but it was a really tough decision.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, what's really helped the show and the YouTube presence and just, you know, viewers is finally we just put up everything, right? Clipped up the entire show. You know, I think they get more sort of direct feedback on sort of what works and what doesn't on digital. It's obviously driven, you know, millions and millions of YouTube views. But that's, you know, sort of one of the biggest changes that we made.
Yeah, I mean, like, because when you're trying to decide what 4 sketches to put up on Saturday night, you're still so close to it, and you almost don't, you have a guess about what people are gonna like, but you don't really know.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's very interesting to see, like when we look at the YouTube views later in the week, that something that we maybe were iffy about, like turned out to be the kind of the hit of the show in terms of its popularity.
I mean, we've been able to, you know, work with these guys, you know, the Cut for Time, you know, sketches in the show. when I first started, every once in a while we might put one up, but then it became a little bit more of a regular cadence. And that sort of, took on a life of its own. We would put those out, almost every week. But they, started generating a ton of press on Monday, a lot of sort of discussion with fans on why it was cut and, oh, this is better than something that was in the show. And those things would generate millions and millions of YouTube views on their own. And it became sort of something that was sort of more expected by everyone. But that's a sort of a direct conversation with these guys on Saturday night. And I do think it sort of gives them and the writers and people like the film unit directors, another outlet for those things that might not find their way into the show on Saturday.
That's something I really wanted to talk about, and it's back to the live thing. And just for people to understand that you go into the show the night with a running order with sketches.
Yeah.
But with time changing, you are having to make edits in sketches for the later half of the show.
Yeah, I mean, time is very crucial all week long. We have this department called the script department that is kind of the nervous system of the show in a way. And they, from Wednesday on, know at least down to as best they can how long the show is. And so every couple hours, you're getting a new time for the show. Like they will call up to Lauren's office and they'll say like the show is grown by 5 minutes or it's shrunk by 5 minutes. But then we usually go into the live show at 11:30, between 5 and 10 minutes long.
Okay.
There's a natural kind of speed up that happens with people on air. And so sometimes you go in 5 minutes long and you just naturally pick it up because people get a little bit faster. But at the end of the show, we do have to be cognizant of making our time. So the last few sketches, you have them all laid out in the control room, and a lot of times we'll have to call the writers down and say, we need 45 seconds out of this, or, once in a great while, we'll actually say you need to stretch a little bit, you need to slow down.
Oh, that's a beautiful day.
Yeah. But it's pretty nerve-wracking. I mean, I have to say I'm pretty used to it at this point, but it is pretty crazy to get called down to the control room and to have someone say, like, find a 30-second cut right now.
Yeah.
It happens every week.
I learned it from Sudie Green, one of the other supervising writers, that if your sketch is in the second half of the show, you have the script and you go through and you just lightly mark a minute cut just to have it, just in case.
Yeah. You try to go in with some ideas in your
Yeah, and the thing is, as a writer, you want to get precious.
Do that with tears coming down your face. I mean,
yeah, there's a
the writers-
violin. Just burying my child. Yeah, very sad. But like, you kind of want to be precious and get all the jokes in because you think that's the best way to have the sketch happen. But sometimes cutting a minute out and losing some of those darlings is actually really helps.
I mean, really, sometimes you don't notice it, I hate to say.
Yeah,
really,
I know.
You're like, oh, I should have done this on Wednesday.
Yeah, people are never like, I wish that sketch went on for longer. Never. That's great.
Back to YouTube, it's a younger demographic on YouTube. Is that important, or is SNL watched in linear television by everybody, or is it a predominantly older audience?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an older audience on linear TV. The YouTube demographic and other social platforms is younger, more sort of, 18 to 49, 12 to 24, whatever. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely sort of two different audiences. And I think, that goes back to the decision to put the entire show up everywhere. Look, we just want sort of people to watch the show, right? Some people are going to experience that on linear. Some people are going to experience that on digital. But I think we're sort of past that sort of point of like, oh my God, you have to watch, on Saturday nights at 11:30.
The kind of interesting thing though that I feel like we've noticed is since putting the whole show up online, there hasn't been any erosion in the ratings. In fact, kind of the opposite.
Kind of the opposite, right? I mean, it spurs so much conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, YouTube is interesting because that's a real sort of long tail platform, versus there's a lot we do on other platforms. It's sort of ephemeral, and we put it up that night, and it's sort of gone a day or two later. YouTube is a platform where it's really interesting. Something from a current season or a recent season can still generate a ton of views weeks, months, years after it airs. Sometimes for no apparent reason. Sometimes for really apparent reasons. And then we're really, really lucky with SNL. We have 44 seasons of sort of archive material. that we don't just sort of dump on YouTube and sort of, hey, go at it, try to find it, but we release sort of hopefully a little thoughtfully, contextually sort of editorialize it around decades, cast members, characters, whatever that is. So, we're really, really lucky, as a digital organization that we've got this amazing sort of library of content and then what these guys are doing every week.
Okay. I'd like to talk about the incredible power of the show that I hinted at, which is that it actually changes the way that Americans think about themselves, but particularly now about the way they think about their politicians. And we saw some of the reasons there. Now, that's a real power in a writing room. Is it a power you're aware of? Is it a power that you're sensitive about? Or are you just writing the jokes?
I think it's easier to focus on the jokes because the first thing you have is the table read and you want people in the room to laugh. I think that's usually what I'm thinking about while writing.
I mean, we will debate, a piece after it's written, but I think if you're thinking about like, what is the impact of this piece or how is this going to shape thought, it's like paralyzing. I don't think you can really write from that place, or it's very difficult to do that.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we're also so up against it in terms of, sometimes a story will have happened and you're trying to write a sketch in the next hour. It almost feels sometimes more analogous to journalism than it does to news analysis, that it's kind of like the first draft of things sometimes.
Yeah, the Access Hollywood tape happened at 6:30 on a Friday evening.
Yes.
I just remember I think we had the cold open table.
Yes.
And then it ended and then everyone was getting phone alerts.
Exactly.
And then just sitting there like this as it came in.
Yeah.
Okay, honey, put the kids to bed. I don't have a family, but it was like,
Yeah.
Well, that leads us onto something. I mean, I've watched a lot of SNL. I'm not a political scientist, but I'm reading that President Trump is not your favorite president. And I wondered about impartiality and if there is ever an issue with that. You're on a major network. Is there ever a sense that there has to be some kind of balance in the comedy?
There is a notion that we're even-handed. I mean, we do try to, hit both sides as much as possible. I think that was an easier ideal to maintain 3 or 4 years ago. I think that things are just so topsy-turvy now that I think that's hard. But we don't want to be seen as sort of a shill for one side or the other. I do think that comedy that's written, purely to advance an ideological agenda usually isn't that funny, and that's from both sides of the aisle. But I think naturally we just are going to make fun of whatever's ridiculous. We're going to make fun of hypocrisy or whatever is
There's a kind of a comedy truism that where people say politics now is so ridiculous that there's no place for satire. It's doing it itself. Yet you're doing it every week. Is it more difficult because of the ridiculousness of elements of politics?
Well, there was a cold open where we had Kenan Thompson play his Steve Harvey character in a meeting with Trump, and people thought we just did it because Kenan had a Steve Harvey impression, but that was a thing that happened in the news. No one registered that was a real event. They were like, "Oh yeah, that's."
You just made that up.
Yeah.
But it really happened, and I feel like that happens a fair amount now. I mean, I will say, you are starting to feel just not necessarily at our show, but I think just amongst Americans in general, just this kind of fatigue. I mean, we were scouting this summer, and we saw one of the Second City shows, and they sort of made a point of never saying the name Donald Trump in the whole show, which I felt like it was kind of emblematic of something that's a little bit in the water. And I'm not saying that we would ever go down that road, but I'm just saying that it does feel difficult sometimes. It feels like it's sort of turned into this constant background radiation of insanity.
Yeah, it's hard.
And, it's tough sometimes.
Yeah, it's like atrocities against our society's most needy populations isn't really the most fertile soil for laughter.
But how does it feel when you are doing comedy sketches, and the President of the United States is tweeting about those comedy sketches, often in quite a offensive way.
Yeah.
That must be weird, particularly for you, Eric. You worked under different presidents.
Sure. I mean, it's something that we all talk about, and it's something that you kind of find a little validating, I think. But, but again, you kind of like can't think about it as it's happening. Like you can't, at least for me, it's difficult to come up with something from the place of thinking like, well, the president's going to see this, and what is his reaction going to be to it? Like, I feel like then you're already kind of having like a meta conversation about what you're about to write, and that just doesn't work for me. You know?
Yeah, you gotta work fast.
Yeah.
So like getting stuck in an existential reverie about
Yes.
power and like.
Yes. We kind of just don't have the luxury for those thoughts sometimes because the show moves so fast. Like that doesn't mean that like on your next week off you can't think like, God, that's crazy. This guy just tweeted at us, you know? But like I think in the moment you don't really dwell on it.
Yeah, it's like a funny thing I'll think about after, like, oh, the sketch that I just wrote is now an SNL sketch.
Right.
Just like had a cognitive disconnect.
Right.
Like, I guess fill in the blank cabinet member will hear about that.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure they have Google alerts set up.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
More of an interesting thing to think about than like a motivation.
Right.
I'm just going to ask another question, but while we're doing that, would you think about questions that you want to ask live? Because we'll take the mics out and after this section. Hosts, because that's the other thing about the show. It's you have your fantastic cast, but then you have incredibly famous people hosting. Now, how difficult is it? Who chooses the host, by the way? Events probably do, but someone has to book them. And how difficult it is. This is somebody who's coming in who may not have done it before,
Right.
to be in a live show. There must be a lot of problems with that, or potential pitfalls.
Potential pitfalls. I mean,
Yeah.
it really runs a gamut. We have a talent department who is kind of, responsible for at least like suggesting hosts to Lorne. It's ultimately really his decision. I mean, it's something that the writing staff will weigh on in a little bit, and the cast will weigh in on. But it really is ultimately Lorne's decision. And it really, I don't know. I mean, it's like, it truly runs a gamut. It's like sometimes there are people who have never done it before, who you maybe are a little worried about, and they turn out to be fantastic. Mm-hmm. And then there are some people that you assume are gonna be slam dunks and are a little wobbly. Definitely early in the week, people are naturally nervous.
Yeah.
It's often the only live experience that people have done. I mean, like I feel like people that have a theater background often are just more comfortable with it because they know what it's like to stand on a stage in front of an audience. But like I guess I was saying earlier, I think that a lot of things that happen at the beginning of the week are there to kind of like allay the fears of a nervous host sometimes.
Yeah, I think a good host is usually someone who's comfortable with taking people's word for it.
Yes.
And trusting the process.
Yes,
Like if we do a
exactly.
good job of making them trust us, they'll have a good week.
Because you kind of do have to take a leap of faith. You really have to put yourself in the hands of the show. And I think the more you push back against it, the more complicated it gets.
Who's the best?
Who's the best? I don't know who I think the best of all time is, but I mean, there's definitely...
There's been a lot of really good ones.
There really have been
I
a
think
lot.
Don Cheadle was one of my favorites from this year.
Yeah, I really liked him.
Yeah.
Donald Glover I thought was great.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Alec is really sort of part of the cast now,
Yes.
but like
Yeah.
was historically a fantastic host.
Tom Hanks?
Tom Hanks was
Yeah.
great, was fantastic, has always
Yeah.
been kind of fantastic.
You get those people who are so famous that it's like Microsoft Word wouldn't put like red squiggly under your name. And then they come in and host, and you're like, it's like talking to the sun.
Yeah.
I was so nervous about that.
Yeah, but he was great.
I think Adam Sandler is also one of my favorites.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean,
Michael Keaton, yeah.
Was he?
I don't. Oh yeah, he was great. He was great. You're right. He was great.
Is that Michael
Exclusive.
Keaton?
Michael, come down.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
girl.
I mean,
Okay.
I really have a hard time remembering things sometimes. I have to admit.
I think my favorite was Saoirse Ronan. That was.
She was great.
She should come back.
Yeah, I bet she will.
Yeah. Great.
Okay, let's go to questions. If people have questions, if you could, it's quite hard to see. So where are we? People that are, somebody here just in the front. In the middle. Yeah, keep your hands up, and we'll
Hi guys, welcome
Hey.
to the UK. So good to have you and to hear from you. Eric, I just wanted to find out from you, particularly because you've been doing it for so long, when it comes to comedy writing, what would you say is the secret to that? What would you say? How do you become a comedy writer?
Well, I feel like it feels to me like from what I've talked to people about, it's a little different over here than it is in the US maybe. I mean, I think that we in the US do benefit from having bigger staffs. You know, I mean that it is harder for you guys to break in because you know, you can in the US be sort of the junior member of a writing staff and kind of come up that way. And I think it's more difficult here. I mean, I didn't do this, but I would encourage people to get on stage and to perform. I mean, I think doing some stand-up, doing some improv is incredibly valuable. I did not do that, and I regret it every day because I feel like there's kind of no replacement for that feeling of standing on stage. And I guess, I mean, just try to write a little bit every day. You know, try to be disciplined about it, and then try to not be precious about, you know, try to show it to people and don't be precious about it, and kind of like respond to what people are saying. I think that goes a long way. I mean,
Yeah, I think doing it a lot helps just getting in reps, because I think new people tend to be like, I wrote one sketch and I want notes on it.
Yes,
It's like,
yes.
write 50.
right, and you can get very precious about like this is a problem sometimes at the show with new writers where they'll have one sketch that they think is great and they'll keep resubmitting it. I think that like the sooner you get to the point where you're like, I'm gonna be writing a lot of stuff, and it's like it's all not, some of it's great, some of it's not, but like I'm confident in my ability to kind of just produce in volume. I think that's a good place to get to.
Yeah.
And there's that old being funny thing, you know that?
Sure, right, but
Yeah,
that's, I mean,
be
We've got a
heard as a
question-
child.
There was a question right at the back, I think. Yeah.
Hi, hello. There were a couple of episodes on 30 Rock where they were pressured to reach out to the Midwest or the real America, and I wondered if that was drawn from a real pressure that SNL faced or faces from NBC. Do you feel a kind of pressure to reach out to the Midwest and kind of the real America?
Well, I'm from the Midwest, so I don't particularly feel that pressure, I guess. I don't know.
Something Lauren will say is we're on in all 50 states.
Yeah.
So there is an attitude towards, you know, not just writing for people who live in your exact zip code.
Right. I mean, we don't really feel any pressure from that from the network at all. I mean, we're very insulated from the network. I can't really remember too many times we've gotten direct content notes from the network. It really just kind of doesn't happen. But Lauren will say that. Lauren will say, like, remember, we're on in all 50 states. But that's usually more about if there's something particularly like New York provincial. Like if someone writes something about, you know, Dwayne Reed or whatever, and, you know, sometimes Lauren will be like, well, maybe remember that they don't have those in Omaha. You know?
Yeah.
And the point that we were discussing beforehand, which was of interest to me, was the network involvement and how much NBC are across. But you were saying that there's such a trust in this as an institution that you're they believe you'll be fine.
Yeah,
well, that's power.
It's nice. It's nice. Yeah.
Any more questions?
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Got the mic.
Yeah, we will go next. Thank you.
I was just wondering what the thought process is on recurring sketches. Is it something where the host comes in and says, hey, I want to do what's up with that? Or is it just like, oh, it's been a while, maybe we should do it?
It's a mixture of both. It really is. I mean, sometimes you really will get hosts who come in on Monday and say, like, I want to do what up with that. And a lot of times we're just fine with it. It's nice when a host tells you kind of what they want to do, because it at least gives you something to react to. But then, sometimes it will be the other way. Often something that will happen is we'll read the sketches on Wednesday and then stuff will get picked, and then on Wednesday night, sometimes it'll be obvious that we kind of have a hole in the top of the show. And so then sometimes that's when we call it ordering up a sketch, where you'll say, like, let's do, you know, Family Feud or something. Yeah, exactly. You know, some of the sketches like that are also good containers for holding topical material that you know might change as the week goes along. So sometimes we'll put one of those in place and know that it's probably going to get totally rewritten on Friday.
Yeah.
That happens too.
But in terms of like an original character recurring sketch, it's more by feel.
Yeah.
It's like every...
There's no
Yeah.
theory to it at all.
Yeah, like, oh, we'll do a Halloween version.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Someone got the microphone? Here we go.
Hi, yeah, you were just mentioning about some of the people you've had to host the show.
Are you the Michael Keaton guy?
No, I'm not. I'm a Val Kilmer. No, I'm not. I was just wondering about when you have hosts come in who aren't known for comedy, who aren't comedians, how often do they come in and say, I've written a couple of sketches? and how do you deal with that?
It happens less than you'd think. It's happened maybe once or twice, but usually what happens is on Monday after that pitch meeting, the head writers and the producers will kind of have a conversation with the host, and often they'll say like, I would like to do something like this, or like, I think this idea is kind of funny, or I do a good German accent or whatever. And we'll usually try to find a kind of container for that, but it's very seldom that someone with no comedy background comes in and says, I've written a couple of sketches. We definitely do have people with comedy backgrounds that come in, and that's always very welcome. You know, I mean, when like John Mulaney or Dave Chappelle comes in with a couple of sketches, you're very happy.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Can you?
Sometimes it'll be like a loose idea of like, I do this character with my friends.
Right.
But it's less like I've written it and more like I'm shyly saying it, waiting for people to beg me to say more.
Right. But it's still kind of nice to have a place to start from, even if you're not going to go with it. Like, just have.
Yeah,
it's useful for me.
Yeah, it's good to know. Like, oh, Margot Robbie thinks she can do Keira Knightley. Great.
Right. Yeah.
It's a nice starting point. Yeah. She can. She did.
She did. Yeah.
My first sketch.
It's good.
It was good.
Eric, you said a really interesting thing about a long-running show that people remember that their favorite time was their high school time.
Yeah.
So look, we got to the end here. What was your favorite Saturday Night Live time?
Well, I mean, I think I was in, I guess, junior high or late elementary school, but I guess I'm kind of biased towards the sort of Dana Carvey, Phil Hartman, late 80s kind of era. I mean, I have things I like about every era, but that's the one that I probably identify as my
Michael,
original cast.
What's your SNL time?
I don't want to date myself. I'm like older. No, but a lot of the Will Ferrell, Tina Fey, Fallon, that whole era. But I do remember the 70s. I remember, being a little kid and my sort of parents inappropriately probably letting me watch SNL when I was, really, really young. But I really remember it vividly. So.
Anna?
Yeah, Will Ferrell, Tina Fey, Jimmy Fallon. Yeah.
Well, it has been a privilege hearing from you today, talking about this incredible show, which we can actually reveal something about, Michael.
Well, that was revealed yesterday in the press, but no, we can talk about it.
Let this be an excuse.
Yes. So you will actually be able to watch SNL in the UK now, on the new Sky Comedy channel that was just announced. It sounds like it's going to start in February. And the entire show, I guess, certain regions or certain parts of the world, they would cut the show down in 60 minutes, but it'll be the full 90-minute version. It sounds like it'll air a day or two after it airs in the US. But yeah, so you'll finally be able to watch it. And it's, like I said, incredible to watch the clips on YouTube in the order, whatever order you want. But you'll get to see the show in its entirety, like as these guys, sort of put it together.
Their gift to you. So everyone, thank you very much to the panel, and thank you to sponsors YouTube, and thanks to you.
Thank you.